Tusinzirira ku mukutu ogwa Point Media UG okutuusaako biki ebigenda maaso mu kisaawe ky'ebyobufuzi wano mu ggwanga erya Uganda. Nkwaniriza ate ne nkulamusaako naawe osinziira okuba ng'okyatugoberera ate ne nkubiriza naddala gwe eyakatweyongako obeere ng'osubscribinga, likinga, sharinga ate commentinga tubeere nga tutambulirwa mu kakati. Amawulire ge tuli mu kufuna galaga nti munnamateeka wa Robert Kyagulanyi Ssentamu omukulu amanyikiddwako nga Robert Amsterdam ayina kampuni ey'abannamateeka ey'amaanyi era emanyikiddwa okwetooloola ensi yonna yonna emanyikiddwako nga Amsterdam and Partners. Ayongedde okuteeka akazito ku General Yoweri Kaguta Museveni awamu ne mutabani we, wabula si be bokka nga kw'otadde n'omukulembeze ow'eggwanga erya Tanzania Samia Suluhu oluvannyuma lw'ebyo bye yakola mu kalulu akaakaggwa mu mwaka gwa 2025 awamu n'ebyo ebikyagenda mu maaso wali eri mu ggwanga erya Tanzania. Gwampuliriza era alaba omukutu ogwa Point Media UG nga tufulumyemu ko katono nnyo okugenda wali eri mu ggwanga erya Tanzania. Eggwanga lino eno lyerimu ku mawanga waneeno mu East Africa agabadde galabwanga agalimu enkola eya demokrasia, wabula ku mulundi guno ensi yonna yonna yeewuunyiza era neewuniikirira oluvannyuma lw'ekyo ekyabaddewo. Twafunye alipoota ez'enjawulo ez'abantu enkumi n'enkumi okuba nga battiddwa mu kaweefube ak'omukulembeze waayo Samia Suluhu okubeera nga yeeremeza mu bukulembeze, era byonna byonna gye byaggweredde ng'omukyalo ono yeerangiridde n'ebitundu ebisoba mu 9 ku buli 100 mu kalulu akaagenda maaso okuba nga akuba. Opposition leader ow'oludda olwo y'omwami amanyikiddwako nga Tundu Lissu, wabula ye okwawukanako ne Robert Kyagulanyi Ssentamu yakwatibwa era bw'atyo akyali mu kkomera abeere nga tavaayo kulemesa na kuwakanya kalulu kuba biki ebyava mu kalulu akagaggwa wali eri mu ggwanga erya Tanzania. Kakati nno wano mu ggwanga erya Uganda okusingira ddala mu East Africa katugambe General Yoweri Kaguta Museveni yalabwanga taata w'amawanga amalala gonna gonna, era kaakati waliwo eŋŋambo ezitandise okugamba nti influence ya General Museveni na biki byakola etandise okusaasaana ne mu mawanga amalala. Kyekyo lwaki twalabye ebyabadde mu ggwanga erya Tanzania awamu n'okwemulugunya okwekalakaasa okusussa ensangi zino okugenda mu maaso wali eri mu ggwanga erya Kenya. Wabula General Yoweri Kaguta Museveni yakabeera ku bukulembeze okumala emyaka 4 bweddu, era ng'ennaku z'omwezi nga 29 bagenda kuba bajaganya mu butongole okuweza emyaka 4. Okulangira okwabadde ennaku z'omwezi nga 17 kwamwongedde emyaka emirala 5 abeere ng'asembeza obukulembeze bwe okumala emyaka 45. Wabula Robert Kyagulanyi Ssentamu opposition leader wano mu ggwanga erya Uganda akyavuddeyo okuwakana era okugaanira ddala biki akakiiko aka Electoral Commission bye kavaayo okuba nga kalangirira. Wabula olw'okuba ensonga ziri bwe zityo bw'atyo n'abeera ng'aliira ku nsiko, era nga mu videos ez'enjawulo zavuddeyo okututegeezaako okutuwa updates butya bwali na mbeera ki gy'ayitamu. Kyagulanyi yatutegeeza ennaku z'omwezi nga 16 yadduka mu maka ge olw'okuba mutabani wa mwami Museveni General Muhoozi Rugaba yali asindisa abantu babeere nga bamutuusaako obulabe, bw'atyo n'abeera nga atoloka okuva mu maka ge magere abeere nga ataasa obulamu bwe. Kakati ye Robert Amsterdam ng'omwami ono asobodde okubeererawo Robert Kyagulanyi Ssentamu bukyanga ayingira mu by'obufuzi by'eggwanga lino erya Uganda, awandiise ebbaluwa awamu ne kampuni ye ey'amateeka ez'enjawulo era enfunda eziwererako ddala nga balabula General Yoweri Kaguta Museveni nti singa obulabe bwonna bwonna butuusibwa ku Robert Kyagulanyi Ssentamu wajja kubeerawo ensonga ate ezigenda mu bukyamu. Era omukulu ono mu bbaluwa gye yakasembayo okuwandiika yavaayo n'ategeeza nti ali mu kutegeezaako n'amawanga ag'enjawulo okuli America, Germany, Bungereza awamu n'amalala ku mbeera nga bw'etambula mu ggwanga lino erya Uganda. Wabula ku mulundi guno mu interview gye yasobodde okuba nga akola, Robert Amsterdam alabuliddemu ne President w'eggwanga erya Tanzania era n'ayongera okunnyonnyola awamu n'okulabisa mu nsi yonna yonna biki ebigenda mu maaso mu ggwanga erya Uganda. Gwampuliriza ku mukutu, ensonga ezo tugenda kuba tuziyitamu bulungi nnyo. Wabula okusookera ddala nanyagadde okuba nga nkujjukiza Hajjati Nakalembe omusomi w'edduwa ono ng'asangibwa we Busaabala ku stage esembayo. Mutuukirire ajja kuba akolako bulungi nnyo mu buli kimu kyonna kyonna ekikusumbuwa akulombera edduwa ebizibu byo bibeere nga bikuviirako ddala. Mu kiseera kye kimu gwali wabweru bw'eggwanga erya Uganda osobola omutuukira ku nnamba eri nooti 752375 29 bw'oba oyagala okumanya ebisingawo.
Salamu alaikum. Hajjati Nakalembe omusomi w'edduwa. bw'oba wenyiyo embeera embi yankusomere ku dduwa abali ebweru mirimu gigaanye papula zeesibye kino kyekyoto kwesabira omukisa kobe ng'odiriddawa wali wenkusabira n'ofuna emikisa kyoba olaba ngabirira ebinyonyi ebitalina kyakulya naawe atalina mulimu jangu kusomere ku dduwa ofuna omukisa eno ennyanja kwesula buli kimu ekisira ne kiba kikujjudde nekikasuka mu nnyanja nekikunta nekigenda nze aja tina kalenge kambawo ennamba yange yeeno 0725375 temuddeeyo nemwebakira ebizibu mukobe ku nnamba yange eno.
Kakati awatali kumala budde bulala bonna tugenda kuba tugenda mu interview eno omukulu Robert Amsterdam gye yavuddeyo okuba ng'akola ku mukutu ogumu ng'ayongera okunnyonnyola mbeera ki eri mu ggwanga erya Uganda, mbeera ki Gen. Museveni ne mutabani we gye bataddewo era mbeera ki Robert Kyagulanyi Ssentamu gy'ali mu kuyisibwamu.
Hi, Mr. Robert Amsterdam. Welcome to Africa Things. Today we'll be looking at the circumstances occurring or that occurred during the recent elections in Uganda and Tanzania. East Africa particularly, we heard reports that Bobby Wine, Robert Kyagulanyi, your client, is in a bit of a trouble as threats are being hurled towards his way. However, the government denies that he is in trouble. You have defended Robert Kyagulanyi and you provide legal advice for him for a long time. But what is the current situation in Uganda regarding Robert Kyagulanyi, otherwise known as Bobby Wine?
Well, it's very simple. The man who is not elected but continues to present himself as president, Museveni, has a son who is taking pride in having murdered many members of the party that President Wine heads, and has extended himself to a large number of threats involving loss of life. As you are aware, I defended Bobby when he was illegally taken in Arua years and years ago, and was with him, was able to free him from torture and get him medical help in the United States. And brave beyond brave is what I can say about this man, who is risking his life for the people of Uganda. And as you know, 70% of the populace is under 17. And there is no question as to who won this last election.
Well, but Mr. Amsterdam, some of Bobby Wine's critics say that there were reports in the international media that he has been arrested by the police or the UPDF, the National Army of Uganda. However, the UPDF and the police came out saying that they have not actually arrested or kidnapped him. And Bobby Wine came out saying that he escaped from his house when security forces came there, and that his response or his statements are not credible. So why should people believe that his life is in danger, they argue? Your take?
Look, let's be really clear. They shot his bodyguard in Arua. They shot the gatekeeper in Kampala. They've admitted to killing many of the members of his party. It is not a stretch to talk about the risk that Mr. Wine is in. All you have to do is watch how, I call them a militia, I don't call them police, how they've harassed and brutalized the people of Uganda who came out time after time to express their support for Bobby Wine, how they were gassed, how their ability to exercise their democratic rights were restricted illegally and unlawfully by a thugocracy. Uganda is a thugocracy. There is nothing, there's no word for what's going on in Uganda today other than a disgrace. And it's a barefaced thugocracy that the United States and every civilized nation should condemn. And Bobby Wine's safety after having won that election should be paramount in the minds of foreigners, especially foreign donors or those countries that work with Uganda.
Well, your law firm, AP Partners, came up with a press release a few moments ago calling on the international community to ensure Bobi Wine's protection. But some of his critics are saying that it's neither here nor there, and it's calculated to tarnish the image of Uganda, both locally and internationally.
Well, it's kind of funny. I don't need to tarnish Uganda's image. They do it for themselves and very well. Just look at the statements that have been made by Museveni's son. I mean, just take a look at what he said, and I can quote this purported general. If he doesn't surrender to the police, we will treat him as a rebel and handle him accordingly. Personally, I'm embarrassed by our record. 22 protesters killed in 1 week is too low. I promise to do better. Are you kidding me? Are you seriously trying to suggest anything I or any other human being could say could harm Uganda's reputation more than the rantings of this man? And remember, it is Uganda's obligation under domestic and international law to protect the lives of their citizens. Look at what this man says. He says, I tell you that the NUP will be removed and extinguished from our land like a bad dream. This man has no idea of what rights and obligations he, in his position, is supposed to respect. He is completely lawless. He is an outside the law operator in a uniform that is ill-fitting anyone who has any claim to rule of law or democracy. The Ugandans have only themselves to blame for a terrible reputation in the international community that is not being assisted by their attempting to hunt down the winner of the last election, Mr. Wine.
But some analysts in Uganda tell me that the statement or X messages posted by the son of the president does not reflect that of the government, and the government, he does not speak for the government, so it should be ignored.
That's a complete joke. If he doesn't, firstly, he's the president's son. Secondly, if the president or the government wants to disclaim this moron, then it's up to them. But they haven't. They've stood by him. It is their obligation. The man wears a uniform. He is, to all intents and purposes, a reflection of the government of Uganda. If they don't like their reflection in the mirror, they should change how they act. And let me tell you, all these analysts you're talking to are in the pay of Museveni, clearly, because when you read the statements this man has made, you have to be kidding me to try to argue that anyone can have any doubt that Uganda is behaving in a completely lawless manner that more befits a rebel militia than allegedly a, quote, government that holds power. It's a shame on Uganda. It's a shame on Africa. The African Union should have intervened already, just like they should have intervened in Tanzania. We have thousands dead in the streets in Tanzania, with the African Union doing nothing. It is a crime against humanity, what happened in Tanzania. And we need, and Bobby Wine has been very cautious to say any protest should be peaceful and within the law. And that needs to be understood. There is no violence, there are no threats coming from Mr. Wine or his political party. All the threats are coming from the son of the president in his ceremonial garb as a general.
Is that why your organization or your law firm is calling on the international community to ensure his protection in Uganda?
Of course, because we have no assurance within Uganda of any part of the country that operates as part of Museveni's operation of taking real responsibility for their behavior.
But some people are suggesting that President Museveni has been very clear and unambiguous that anybody who breaks the law will visit them, and that those who have not broken the law are free to campaign. They campaigned, nothing happened to them.
I don't know what you've been looking at in terms of Uganda. The violence in the streets, the constant use of tear gas against peaceful protesters. Where have you been? This has been going on in this election, in the past election. Bobby Wine was tortured to near death years ago. What they did to Mr. Bisagi is outrageous. They continue to persecute everyone with the guts to stand up to this absolutely shameful military regime that should have been rid of 20 years ago or more.
But what do you say to some of the critics of the opposition, including Bobby Wine, your clients, that if they know the elections were a sham, if they knew they would be cheated, if they knew the system was rigged against them, why participate in an election in the first place? Because boycotting it will not give it the legitimacy it requires, they argue.
Listen, there is no legitimacy either way. What's important is Bobby Wine, just like Tundu Lissu, attempted to operate within the system that legally exists. They obeyed the law. You don't do your party, those people who support you, any justice when you just fail to participate, and then the government claims legitimacy and argues that you're an outlaw by not participating. You can't win by failing to strongly condemn what happened in Uganda. Whenever countries fail, I always get a kick out of people who argue, well, don't show up. Well, tell that to the Russians who decided at the United Nations not to vote and allowed their client state of Libya to be destroyed. When you don't show up, you face terrible consequences. Bobby Wine tried to operate within the system. And what has it gotten him? He's being treated like an outlaw, quote, or a rebel, quote, with 22 of his colleagues in the party already dead, and God knows how many more arrested, detained, and tortured.
Well, some people are arguing that perhaps what has happened requires an international investigation, perhaps by the International Criminal Court. Others are saying it's just being blown out of proportion. Where do you stand on that? Because you're an international lawyer, you're a human rights defender, you've defended a lot of Africans across the board.
Well, I tell you, the International Criminal Court right now, I would hope, given the gravity of the death toll in Tanzania, might operate there. I think right now in Uganda, that one of the terms for their intervention is gravity. And thank God, as of now, we don't have numbers that would require the intervention of the ICC, though it may be appropriate only in that there is no judiciary in Uganda that would ever discipline or give consequences to President Museveni. But you talk about critics and this and that. Very few people publicly lend their names to supporting Museveni when it comes to supporting statements like that of the general that he's only killed 22 and he's sad about it. I mean, these are indefensible comments. And they, I have been in Africa since I was a boy. My first trip in Africa was 50 years ago in Nigeria. And we all expected so much more for the development of the continent. And what we've seen in East Africa is a terrible tragedy. When you look to the great lions of the period that saw independence, you see these great heroes, and then you look at what we're dealing with now in East Africa. It's just a terrible, terrible shame.
Now, in Tanzania, the internet was shut down for days. In Uganda, it was the same. But some people are saying the circumstances are different because in Uganda, the government said the response to violence unleashed by the youths or the Gen Zs to go after people's property was such that they had to respond. And the president said the response of the security agencies or the pushback by the security agencies was proportionate to the violence unleashed by the youths.
It's a joke. I mean, have you watched the violence unleashed by the thugs of Museveni at every campaign stop of Bobby Wine? It's been incredible to watch. And fortunately, there are movies, there are videos of all of the government's misconduct. We have it all on film. So the government is the violent player that has put Uganda in this terrible position. And I hope they come to their senses, provide Bobby safe passage back to be with his family, remove the army that has padlocked his home and with his wife inside the house, and allow normalcy to return so that Mr. Wine and his party can rebuild and properly contest this bogus election.
In Uganda, the government said the internet shutdown was necessary to prevent misinformation and people using it to abuse and undermine the territorial integrity of Uganda and to protect life and property. And that it was necessary for the government mandated by the Constitution to protect people and to maintain law and order. You are shaking your head. Why so?
It's a joke. I mean, the people who are lighting the fires work for the government. There is no law and order in Museveni's Uganda unless you support Museveni. He defines a citizen as those who work for him. He has no idea of what an actual citizen inside Uganda is if they don't agree with him. These are the ravings of a man who's been in power for 40 years and who's just absolutely attempting to develop a dynasty and pass it on to his kid without any deference to the people of Uganda.
Why do you think there seemed to be a plan for the son of the president to come? You mentioned dynasty here. Do you think that is the plan in Uganda?
Well, do you think this son of the president actually qualifies as a general? Are you kidding me? With his statements made in the last week, he'd have been kicked out of any real army in the world.
Now let's go back a little bit to Tanzania. You mentioned Tundu Lissu, who is facing a lot of charges. Some people say the charges are politically motivated. A lot of
charges. He's facing speaking the truth. Again, I've known Tundu many years. He may be the best lawyer in East Africa. He said absolutely nothing that would require almost 270 days in solitary, which is where he's been put, to keep his mouth shut so that he couldn't properly fight the election. And still this woman lost. So, I mean, I can tell you, she lost against herself. So we really need in East Africa to allow the people to peacefully protest the violations of their historic right to be heard.
So
and don't tell me about closing the internet for property rights. Come on. Closing the internet is a violation of all the international treaties that Uganda and Tanzania have signed. It makes them no better than Iran. It puts them right up there with Iran and North Korea and all those other countries that are shameful murderers of their own people. That's what we're seeing in Africa. We are seeing the return of Idi Amin's type of government. That's what we're seeing. And it is incredible to me that anyone in Uganda watching what's going on today, or for that matter in Tanzania that's going on to me, can be anything other than critical of the governments who deploy tools and resources that are contrary to every international treaty in order to shut down the voice of the people.
Well, where does Tundu Lissu go from here in Tanzania? Because
Listen, I want him to go out of jail. That's the first step I want him to do. Believe me, I was with Tundu when he was recovering from being shot 16 times at the hands of Magufuli. And as his friend, I begged him not to go back. He went back, he fought an election, he won, it was stolen from him. Then he went back again. I saw him just before he went back the last time and begged him again not to participate. He did, of course. I mean, this is a man who could have a fabulous career as a top-seeded international lawyer, but instead ruins his life and his health and is nearly murdered for trying to represent the interests of his people. Uganda and Tanzania are blessed to have incredibly courageous and selfless leadership in Bobi Wine and Tundu Lissu.
what about Bobby Wine? Because, the government says that all he does basically is to deceive the international community, raise a bunch of money, tarnish the image of the country abroad and with its international partners, just so he will line his pockets with a lot of foreign currencies.
Look, I can tell you, if he was interested in foreign currency, he would be living in Miami, not in Kampala, with the threat of constant arrest or detention. That's just, it's another argument that's devoid of any factual basis. If somebody's interested in money, they don't sit in Kampala, Uganda. I don't know if you've been there recently, but it's not exactly a place for the rich and famous.
So what is your message to Bobby Wine at the moment? Because he said he's in hiding, fearing for his life.
Well, I spoke to him. I spoke to him a few hours ago. I don't have to go through this interview to get a message to Bobby Wine. My message to what pretends to be the government of Uganda is to leave him and his family alone. Let him return to his home in peace, and let Uganda restore rule of law and freedom of speech.
Well, Mr. Amsterdam, thank you very much for your time. We look forward to having you as the events unfold in East Africa. We know you've been in Africa for a long time. You have defended quite a number of Africans on the international stage, and human rights defending has been a very good work for you as you defend the rights of these people across the continent. We appreciate your time here on Africa Things.
Thank you so much, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you.
General Yoweri Kaguta Museveni bwe yamaliriza okuwamba obuyinza mu Januari wa 1986 yasuubiza bannayuganda awamu n'eggwanga erya Uganda lyonna okutwaliza awamu ensi n'eggulu, era bw'atyo n'ategeeza nti embeera eyaliwo ku mirembe gy'abannakyemalira Idi Amin, Milton Obote awamu n'abalala yali tejja kuddamu kubeerawo. Okusingira ddala n'akkaatiriza ng'agamba nti eddembe ly'obuntu okulinnyirirwa awamu n'okulemesa bannayuganda eddembe lyabwe ery'okulonda omukulembeze gwe baagala lyali tebijja kuddamu kubeerawo. Wabula mu kaseera kano tuli mu mulembe gwa General Yoweri Kaguta Museveni emyaka 4 oluvannyuma lw'okuvaayo okwogera ebigambo ebyo, ate nga kaakati naye ageraageranyizibwa ku Idi Amin bwe yalwanisa okubanga eddako. Omukulu Robert Amsterdam nga bw'owulidde bulungi nnyo awo agenze maaso okwogera ku bintu eby'enjawulo ebigenda mu maaso wano mu kisawo eky'ebyobufuzi mu ggwanga erya Uganda, era bw'atyo n'ategeeza nti okuggyako ng'oli muzibe era okuggyako ng'obadde tugoberera biki biri mu ggwanga lya Uganda awamu ne mu Tanzania, w'oyinza okutandika okubuuza ebibuuzo nti ddala mu butuufu Robert Kyagulanyi Ssentamu embeera gy'ali mu kuyitamu agisussa busussa oba ddala mu butuufu obulamu bwe buli mu katyabaga. Kakati emu ku nsonga endala omukulu Robert Amsterdam gy'asobodde okuba nga akoonako ye ya General Muhoozi Kainerugaba bw'amuyitidde omuntu omubuyabuya. Okusinziira ku Robert Amsterdam, okusookera ddala akuba ebituli ku ddaala General Muhoozi lyaliku mu magye ery'obwa General. General Muhoozi okuba nga generaali ate nga muduumizi wa ggye ly'eggwanga erya Uganda, abantu bangi nnyo naddala abo abakuba ebituli mu gavumenti eno abavuddeyo okukivumirira era okukiwakanya. Wabula okumala ebbanga n'ebbanga kaakati era nga ne wano ku mukutu ogwa Point Media tuzze nga tukyogerako, tuwulidde nga mu nkuubo nga zitutegeezaako nti waliwo enteekateeka ey'okulaba nga General Muhoozi addira kitaawe General Museveni mu bigere era eggwanga erya Uganda okulifuula obwakabaka, obukulembeze bubeere bwa nsikirano. Gye buvuddeko twalabyeko Inginiya Winnie Byanyima mukyala wa Dr. Kizza Besigye nga nnyonnyola ategeeza nti mu kisanja kino ekya 2026 ekinaakomekerezebwa 2031 General Museveni kyeyalangiriddwa nti awangudde agenda kuba akifuga ne mutabani we, wabula ye omukulu Robert Amsterdam agamba nti General Muhoozi mu buyabuya era okusinziira ku statements ez'enjawulo zaavuddeyo okukola Robert Kyagulanyi Ssentamu awamu n'ebyobufuzi by'eggwanga erya Uganda yandibadde takyalina kifo kyonna kyonna kya bukulembeze kyalimu, wabula olw'okuba kitaawe ye mukulembeze wano mu ggwanga erya Uganda, embeera neerabika okuba nga bw'etyo bw'etambula. Okyali ku mukutu gwa Point Media UG, ebintu bingi nnyo omukulu Robert Amsterdam byasobodde okuba nga ayogerako byagenze mu maaso okuba nga annyonnyola ku biki ebigenda mu maaso wano mu ggwanga. Wabula ng'ekimu ku byo bye bigambo General Muhoozi byavuddeyo okwogerako nga yeewaana. N'ategeeza nga bwe baakatta bammembers ba NUP bo be bayita abatujju abawererako ddala 22, oluvannyuma ate n'avayo ne yeewaana nti kaakati baweze 30, ate era n'ava nayo okukkaatiriza ng'agamba nti baatumye bakkomando baabwe abali mu kuyigga Robert Kyagulanyi Ssentamu yonna gy'ali bamukwate bamuzzeeyo nga mufu oba nga mulamu. Bino byonna Robert Amsterdam agamba nti tebiyinza kubuusibwa maaso olw'ensonga nti omuntu abyogera okusookera ddala mutabani wa mukulembeze ate ali mu kifo eky'amaanyi eky'oba omuduumizi w'eggye ly'eggwanga erya Uganda. Ebintu bingi nnyo ebisobodde okuba nga byogerwako bisijja kuba nga nziramu, wabula embeera bw'etyo bwerabika okuba nga eri mu kutambula. Omukulu ono Robert Amsterdam mu kunnyonnyodde kaakati enfunda eziwererako ddala nga nkutegeeza nti y'omu ku bannamateeka si ku ssemazinga wa Africa, si mu nsi emu yokka, wabula okwetooloola eggwanga lyonna okwetooloola ensi yonna avuddeyo okulwanirira eddembe ly'obuntu era okugezaako okulaba nti abantu tebanyigirizibwa naddala wano eno ku ssemazinga wa Africa. Ku mulundi guno ensonga z'eggwanga erya Uganda azirimu nnyo era agamba nti ategeezezzaako amawanga amalala gabeere nga gatunula mu nkolagana yaago n'eggwanga erya Uganda okusinziira ku biki ebiri okugenda mu maaso. Tetunnaba kufuna kwanikulwa kwonna okuva mu gavumenti ya General Yoweri Kaguta Museveni mu butongole, okuggyako of course ensonga ze twalabako okuva eri omukulu Andrew Mwenda awamu ne Daudi Kabanda banywanyi ba General Muhoozi Kainerugaba, wabula mu butongole okuva mu gavumenti ya Museveni ku nsonga zino nga bwe zitambula tetunnaba kuba nga tukufuna okwanikula okwo, okuggyako okuba nga tulabyeko amagye awamu ne poliisi nga kw'otadde ne minisita Chris Baryomunsi nga bavaayo okwegaana okunoonya era okuyigga Robert Kyagulanyi Ssentamu. Mu lunaku olw'ejjo n'ab'eŋŋanda ze balemeseddwa okuba nga bagenda mu maka ge okutwalira mukyala we awamu n'abo abali munda ebyokukozesa. Embeera nerabika okuba nga eyongera okulaga nti oboolyawo amazima matono nnyo agoogerwa wano eno mu ggwanga erya Uganda mu gavumenti, kyokka ng'ate bingi nnyo ebimenya amateeka ebikolebwa. Wabula Robert Amsterdam ategeeza nti buli kimu kyonna ekiri mu maanyi ge awamu ne kampuni ye y'amateeka bagenda kuba bakikola okukakasa nti Robert Kyagulanyi Ssentamu tatuusibwako bulabe. Awo sigenda kusukkawo, mwebale nnyo, mwebalire ddala mwenna abasobodde okuba nga mutambula naffe ku Point Media UG kw'okyali, ate era nja kukusaba weekumireko tubeere nga twongera okukuweereza. Mubeere bulungi era mweraba.